Hey everyone, it's Ricky Molina from the Ricky Molina YouTube channel. Today I'd like to do a film score analysis. If you're planning on writing music for film or TV, it really makes sense to study how different styles of music fit into a film score or a TV show. And I started doing sort of a case-by-case genre type of analysis of film scores. And one of them I'd like to share with you is this one here for the film called Sully, which was directed by Clint Eastwood, starring Tom Hanks. And it's about the captain of a U.S. Air Flight 1549 on January 5th, 2009, which was forced to land miraculously in the middle of the Hudson River. So, we're talking about January here in the Northeast, and those waters are mighty cold, and so it was a perilous situation where both engines conked out due to birds entering the engines, the turbines of the two engines, forcing the Captain Sullenberger, to make a decision to land the jet in the middle of the Hudson River because he wasn't able to get enough thrust from the engines anymore, and so it was an emergency landing essentially that he was forced to take. And the movie is about this whole development, and so it's a rather perilous situation, but the way Clint Eastwood handles it is quite interesting. So I'd like to get into this with you as far as the music is concerned related to the film. So as part of my film score analysis, what I decided to do was to create a spreadsheet, which I will include a link so you can download it if you'd like to study it yourself or to use it as a template for your own score analyses. I happen to be very good with Excel because I worked many years as a data analyst, and I created a template for which you can use to study music, and whether it be music for film or music for producing a pop song. Really what this spreadsheet is about is to analyze the orchestration and the arrangement. And what I found that, after doing something like this, which you can do as well, you can do this by hand. What I end up doing a lot of times is just drawing out a schematic. I don't know if you could see this well enough. What I try to do is to divide the song or the piece up into parts, whether it be introduction, verse 1, pre-chorus, chorus, verse 2, etc. And for each scene or part of the song, it's really a good idea to study how the musical instruments are coming in and out of the song, which instruments are leading, which are taking the forefront and which are taking the back stage, if you will. The dynamics and the panning, are the instruments being near stage, middle stage, or back stage, or rear, panned left, panned right, and how forceful are they, and what choice of instruments are being used. So all these things come into play, and they're an important part of arranging a piece and orchestrating a piece. So what I decided to do is to go ahead and create this spreadsheet, which sort of saves me the hassle of trying to find my notes. After you do this for a couple of years, you end up with a bunch of notebooks like this, and you're like, where did I have that song analysis from this particular movie or that particular TV show or something like that? I just find it, in terms of archiving and also using this as a template, it's very useful. So let me show you what's going on here. In the top part of the spreadsheet, you have the, basically what part of the movie we're in or TV show. If this is a song, you may want to break this up into song parts, verse 1, verse 2, pre-chorus, chorus, that sort of thing. In this case, it's a film, so that isn't as relevant. So we look at the timestamp on the film, the timeline. And as the film is progressing, so we see here a minute 57 seconds into the film, we have a title opening, and it opens with Sullenberger, Captain Sullenberger. His nickname is Sully for short, going for a morning run outside a hotel in New York City. So the music that's being played at this point is the Eastwoods, and Clint Eastwood happens to be a jazz pianist, by the way. and he composed the opening theme, which happens to also be the closing theme for this particular movie. So he's a big jazz fan, but in a traditional jazz sense. He's not like smooth jazz or anything like that. He's more of a traditional jazz aficionado, Eastwood is. So the opening scene, it's really soft jazz with major chords in the background. And it happens to be the Tierney Sutton Band, led by Christian Jacob, who happens to be the composer of this film, on piano. And as you see here, the spreadsheet shows that in the near field, we have the female lead vocalist, Tierney Sutton. She's kind of center right a little bit, maybe, followed by the acoustic bass in the mid central part of the stage, if you will. And we have the piano a little bit distant, but it's still kind of center left. And in the background, we have light snare brushes. So as you can see, the spreadsheet is splitting things up into the far end of the stage, the mid-central part of the stage, and the near part of the stage. And center is pretty much anything up the middle here, and anything far left and far right, as far as the spreadsheet is concerned. I try to place that particular instrument to the side. Any sort of dynamic notes, tempo notes, we need to take note of. I've noted also overall impressions of this particular score, which I'll summarize in a few moments. Interestingly enough, Clint Eastwood, when he directed this film, the impression that you get is that he's going to use music in the film in a non-invasive way. He is almost like making a statement, if you will, to the rest of Hollywood, to the composers out there, saying, you know, downshift things a little bit. You're just a little too heavy and over forceful in your scores. In this particular case, he is using music in a minimalist way. There is no overboard sort of epic horn sections or blasting through from the top mezzanine, or you know, ostinatos that get so ostentatious and in your face. There's none of that. It's very sort of like backseat. And I kind of figured out after doing this analysis, you know, Eastwood is really trying to make a statement here, that the music is sort of like a reflection of the character of Captain Sullenberger. You know, if you're familiar with Sully, you know, he's written a book or two about his experiences and about flight safety in general. But he's a very low-key guy. He doesn't like the limelight very much, and this comes across, you know, very forcefully in the movie, as Tom Hanks does an excellent job, you know, really acting out Sully's part, and, you know, low-key guy, unassuming, unostentatious, kind of backseat, but very methodical and precise, and also very ice-cold under pressure, as he had to be while landing this particular plane with 155 people on board into the Hudson. So the music is a reflection of Sullenberger's character. And so just as softly as he lands this twin-engine plane onto the Hudson, in the same sort of softness, the music kind of lands in the movie and sort of supports Sully and the whole progression and development. And it's interesting that Eastwood chooses a jazz ensemble to be the primary spokesman, if you will, of this particular statement that he's making. And one can view this whole movie as kind of like an indirect political statement that Clint Eastwood is making as well, because Clint Eastwood was in politics for a while in California, and maybe he's saying that, you know, true leaders don't toot their horns. They don't have to. And they don't need social media to get out there and give themselves kudos for having accomplished this or that, or giving themselves accolades, you know, so that they get all the glory and the limelight. You know, Sully is the furthest guy from this type of character. He's like I said, unassuming. And maybe Eastwood is saying, hey, you know, it's about time we had somebody like Sully here that we should look up to, and maybe we can try to emulate his example in our own little way. And that's what I get from this movie. I don't know, maybe I'm reading a little too deep into things, but as you can see here, I've got this thing broken down into scene by scene. And another thing that struck me is that in this movie, there isn't that much music. One of the things that stood out to me about this movie, and it was very surprising to me, was, when Tom Hanks and the actors are reenacting the emergency landing onto the Hudson, they re-showed this scene several times because there was a flight simulation hearing that they had to go through to sort of double check whether they broke any rules and whether they had other options instead of landing the plane into the Hudson on a cold, wintry day. But the thing is that, whenever they show these reenactments of the emergency landing, there is no music at all. So it's like, where is the epic horn section? Da, 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 the grandiose brass section in the back, blasting from the high mezzanine to sort of like heroicize this particular emergency landing. There is none of that at all. These landing scenes that you see have no music. And that is particularly telling of Eastwood, and it's a statement. He lets the scene speak for itself. It's like there is no need for supportive aggrandizement in this case, or dressing it up. It's what it is. And by omitting the music in these particular emergency landing scenes, it takes the central limelight of your attention. Whatever music we do have is fairly sparse and far and in between. It's not a continuous sort of lament type of thing. It's like, we have to dress this and that up. No, Eastwood is like, I'm going to add the music to the parts that I think are really important, and it's not going to be invasive. It's going to be sort of supportive, and it's going to keep the movie going in a very calm, non-invasive way. And again, very similar to the character of the hero in this particular instance. So here we have it. For instance, 244, contemplative, alone in the sauna. Sully is thinking about what's transpiring with the investigations. And the music is simply an intimate, slightly wet piano with minor intervals at first, then it picks up with major chords, slightly, moves very slow tempo, almost rubato, and there is no beat here in this music for the most part. There is at the end when we get to the hearing and they do the simulations of the emergency landings. Then there's some certain personal scenes where Sully speaks with his wife over the cell phone in a hotel where he's staying, or if he happens to be out and about. In these particular scenes, you get an intimate, slightly wet piano again, with a mix of minor and major intervals. Occasional chords will be, and double stops will be injected, but it's very, very delicate and slow moving. I'm not going to go through every particular scene because I'm going to provide a link underneath this video so you could download it, and it's going to be on Google Drive, and all you have to do is click the link, and then you can just download the spreadsheet from Google Drive, and then you can study the spreadsheet if you like, or you can make a copy of it and create your own arrangements for any particular song or pieces that you hear. There are some moments where we do get some strings added. We get some female vocals here and there. The quartet comes in later on. But I think the most interesting part for me was towards the end, around an hour and 10 minutes in, where you have the flight simulation scenes during the hearing of the successful simulation landings. And those are the simulation landings, mind you, without the human error factored in. There was a simulation landing they tried to reenact it with computers in a simulator setting, and pilots successfully landed at LaGuardia and then at Teterboro, but without the 35-second delay of the human factor, which must be factored in, as Sully points out. If you've never been faced with a situation like this before, you tend to have to go through a series of checks before you can even make a decision as to what to do. And that's what they were doing. And I've noticed there was this serious contrast between the music of the successful landings, and as we get into the real thing, you begin to see how the music sort of builds in tension, and there is sort of like a bass pulse that is going on underneath the music. And it sort of reminded me a little bit of a tamed version of the Terminator, if you will, that kind of bump, 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 bump type of thing. You get this synth bass pulse with a bowed acoustic bass pulse. There's a soft drum thump as well that kind of like supports this rhythmic pattern, this pulsation. But it's, again, it's very sort of subdued. It's not like in your face, boom, type of thing. But it's still very tense. The chord progression is very interesting as well here. There's a build-up with strings and bassoons and horns. Strings are a little bit wider out, and the bassoon and the horns, there's certain lines that come in together. Very tastefully done by the composer. And as you can see here, it's a minor tonality with occasional dissonance and augmented tonality, ending with a soft minor piano chord going from G minor to E minor. So we start off with an F minor to a D diminished over F pedal bass. The F minor moves to an F augmented, to a G5 chord, to an E minor, down to a C5, back up to G minor, and then the E minor at the end. Notice that there's also a dynamic buildup, which I'm trying to show here with these light blue bars. And the credits come in at the end, and as you may guess, we tend to get into like this major kind of Copland-esque type of sound. It's like using fifths, major fifths, and it kind of reminds me of Aaron Copland's music. Fanfare for the Common Man type of sound, those sort of spread chordal moves, but it's done with violins and strings and basses and cello at first. So very subdued, nothing too over the top here for Eastwood. And at the end, again, the continuation of the major key, the Copland-esque type of major fifths. We sort of transition from the orchestral ending here at the conclusion, and we move into the film credits with the jazz band. So we move away from the orchestral, and the only thing that's carrying over are the strings, perhaps. There are some light strings in the background, sort of pan slightly left and right. There is a trumpet at the very end, as Sully speaks to, that they dedicated the movie to, the survivors. And at that point, a little bit of trumpet comes in to sort of flourish in a tasteful way, in a very sort of understated way. There's like this trumpet type of line. But I noticed also that there was a carryover from the bass, the orchestral bass, the double bass, into the jazz acoustic bass, the upright bass note. The note is kind of like sort of carries over. They're playing sort of the same note that was carried over from the orchestral part just a few moments earlier. We do have a little bit more of piano chordal work going on, and the female lead vocal, Tierney Sutton, comes in at the end. She's very near field, central stage. Everything else is a little bit behind her, and there's a slight percussion hi-hat I noticed in the distance on the right. And then at the very end, we kind of end in a very sort of subdued manner. There's a replaying of the opening Eastwood theme. Remember I said that Eastwood wrote the opening theme to this film on piano himself, and there's this sort of trade-off between a piano and a vibraphone that comes in with the jazz band, the double bass. Starts off with a harp, kind of eases its way in, and the strings, and that's pretty much it. So my closing comments on this, my overall impressions of the film as far as the score is concerned, is that the music is minimalist in style. It's soft and contemplative. As I mentioned, Eastwood is a jazz pianist himself, so he has a rather tasteful view about the role of music in film. The music is never invasive, and it's always supportive. It's never in your face. It's always the back seat. Sometimes it's not even there, as in the reenactments of the crash landing scenes that appear several times as mentioned. Where other directors would have insisted on an epic, in-your-face, very overly dramatic type of music, Eastwood takes the exact opposite route, and it's extremely effective. This minimalist approach complements or underscores the nature and the character of the hero of the film. Sully himself, as mentioned, is an extremely low-key, humble guy who downplays the limelight and attention that he deserves, having pulled off a miraculous landing that saved the life of 151 passengers and the crew. There is no 100-piece plus orchestra here. The director's chosen a 4-piece jazz band, primarily as being the modus operandi for his music, led by composer Christian Jacob in this case. But this is no traditional swing jazz quartet. The music is really soft and contemplative. Well, that's all I have for this particular score analysis. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Your comments and suggestions are welcome. I'd like to do more score analyses like this, and I'll share some more with you along the way in different genres and styles. And if you'd like that sort of thing, please subscribe to my channel, as this will help give me some incentive to keep going and continue sharing some of these musical insights with you. Thanks so much. This is Ricky Molina from the Ricky Molina YouTube channel, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.